Hello, I'm Joseph Shore. I wanted to talk a little bit about the heritage of opera and the heritage of great singing. And I would like to talk about it in a context of opera as we see it today and what is missing. Because most of us know that there's a lot missing. If you're old enough to have seen opera in the 60s or the 70s, or even if you're old enough to have seen it in the 50s, certainly you understand that there is a great deal of difference between what is called opera today and what we viewed as opera then. It's a big difference. So, mainly, what we don't see today are the great voices who express artistry through their voice and through their musicality, using a knowledge of the language, the subtleties of the language, and all in the service of an art form. All of the great singers that impressed us so much in the 40s, 50s, 60s, even 70s were people who were committed to the art form of opera. Now, somehow it took a turn for the worse. I was in my younger days, I was doing Rigoletto with the Goldovsky Opera Touring Company. You know, the Goldovsky Opera Touring Company was the last great touring opera company in the United States. And I did the last tour that Goldovsky did in America. And it was a tour of Rigoletto, and I was performing Rigoletto. And we moved everywhere by bus. Uh, and by a big tractor trailer truck that carried the sets and the costumes. And so we had a lot of time on the bus to talk with Mr. Goldovsky, Mr. G as he liked to be called. And I was picking his brain one day and talking to him about certain fads and movements of opera, even within that time. And he said to me in his high pitched Russian accent, "My boy, today opera is being run by a lot of people who do not really like opera and think something must be done to it to make it acceptable." Now, at that time, I wasn't really quite sure what he was talking about. But now it has become quite obvious that what he said was true. That the art form of opera has been taken over by a lot of people who do not really like opera as an art form. And they think something has to be done to it to make it acceptable. And what they have done to it, in their minds, to make it acceptable, is to weed out all the, all of the potentially great voices and put the stage director and sometimes the conductor in charge of everything. And usually these stage directors are people who are woefully unprepared for the job. Many of them have never even taken courses at the leading acting schools. They really don't know what they're doing. And they come up with gimmicks and stage opera in the craziest of ways, like putting Rigoletto in a space helmet and a space suit and having the last scene of Rigoletto sung on the moon, where Gilda is in a space suit and Rigoletto's in a space. All of that is crap. And it shows that opera has been taken over by a bunch of idiots who do not really like opera as an art form. So I wanted to go back a little bit and share with you my heritage of opera training, where I come from, and why I love it so, and have such great respect for it even today. I'm largely retired as an opera singer today. I'm largely retired even as a teacher today. So I'm given to a lot of reflection. And my main teacher in opera, in voice, was the great Italian baritone Cesare Bardelli. After World War II, there emerged a variety of great operatic baritones, and among them, I believe among the greatest, was Cesare Bardelli. Now, Bardelli had a particular line of succession. He was connected to the heritage of bel canto. Bardelli's teacher was Carlo Tagliabue. Now, if you don't know who that is, let me explain that Tagliabue is considered, among vocal historians, to be the prince of Verdi baritones. Not because his voice was the biggest or even the most tonal, but because of his understanding of bel canto, his phrasing of bel canto, the way he used the language, and the way he used everything in the service of opera as primarily a vocal and musical art form. And we need to attend to that need to be fine actors in opera. I learned the most from Uta Hagen and HB Studios School of Acting, which is their version on the method. But opera is basically a vocal and musical art form. You can have the greatest actor up on stage, but if he's not a great singer, he's not a great musician, he won't move anybody. So there's the deal. Opera depends for its continuity on great voices, great musicians, great linguists who will use the language properly in the service of art. And among Verdi baritones, Carlo Tagliabue was the prince of all baritones. My teacher Bardelli studied with him. And Tagliabue's teachers go way back into the eras of bel canto. So what did I learn from them that was so important to me that I cherish right now? I learned the art of how to express deeper emotions through beauty of tone and through the usage of the breath and the usage of the language. Now, since those are all subtly defined, I can't just give you a laundry list of what the great principles are. But we can at least look at them in that direction. That, first of all, it depends upon having a great voice. If you don't have a great voice, choose some other profession. It depends upon being a great musician. It depends upon really knowing the language you're singing very well so that you can use its nuances. And it depends upon knowing the history of bel canto and of the history of singing in general, so that you have a point of view which goes right along with that continuity. So this is a thank you to my main influence in singing, Cesare Bardelli and Carlo Tagliabue. It's my honor to be in the succession of their teaching. And I try to give that teaching to all of my students. Now, we have added certain things as voice science has come into existence. I know that many of these great singers could not have told you the anatomy or the acoustics of great singing. They wouldn't have known how the larynx worked, and they wouldn't have known an arytenoid cartilage from an aileron. But they knew how to sing. Now today we can use their empirical knowledge of singing, and we can add to it the things that we've learned from voice science. And that also is very important, because so many teachers use language which is very difficult to systematize. They use personal images which have very little communicative value. And it's sort of like, in one way, if you take your car into the repairman, and if you know a little bit about how the car works, you can say, oh, I think there's something maybe wrong with the fuel injectors. Okay. And the repairman will give you a lot more credence and will go right to looking at that, more so than if you say, oh, my car is just making a funny noise. I don't know what's wrong with it. And the laryngologist is very much like that. If you go into him and you say, I'm feeling a lot of dryness around the velar palatal area and extending down into the larynx, then he's going to do a lot more for you than if you just say, oh, my voice doesn't feel good today, doctor. What is wrong with it? So having an understanding about how the voice works will help you in many different ways, not the least of which is getting your money's worth out of the laryngologist. And we do add that information to what we've learned from great singing through the heritage of bel canto and the heritage of singing in general. So today, I would like to challenge you to get more acquainted with the history of great singing. Go to YouTube and listen to the great singers in your flock, whatever your flock is. Since I'm a Verdi baritone, I'm going to be listening to Leonard Warren, Tagliabue, Tibbet, Granforte, Stracciari, Ruffo. In your own flock, listen to the great singers that defined your area of singing in the last century or more, maybe the last 2 centuries, if we have the YouTube evidence for that. And see if what you are being taught currently by your teacher adds up to that. Because today there's a great difficulty in finding competence among teachers. The old teachers have died out. They did not sufficiently pass it on to enough of young teachers to be able to have a full transmission and awareness of how to pass on the heritage of bel canto and of beautiful singing in general. So we have a great problem among voice teachers. And not only are they not aware of great singing, many of them, they certainly are not aware of voice science. If you ask them how your cricothyroids are working, they will not have any way of answering it because they don't know. So this shortcoming in teachers is part of the reason for our falling down so much in the art of singing. But we're all responsible for our own instruments. It is our instrument. It is our body. You are responsible for learning how to use your instrument. Not some teacher. It's you. You're responsible. There's so many great singers who really never even studied seriously with a teacher. Corelli didn't study very seriously with any teacher. He studied a little bit with some pupil of Melocchi, but not really seriously. His talent is what brought his voice out. And you will have to rely on your talent to bring itself out to the foreground so that you can use it. And if you can use it properly, you won't lose it. But the issue is to use it properly. And you're responsible for that. You are responsible for the art of singing today. You may have had terrible teachers. It's still your responsibility because it's your voice. And maybe you didn't have the opportunity to study with some great artist who represents your Bach really well. If you're a soprano, maybe you didn't get to study with Tebaldi, okay? You're still responsible for learning how to use your instrument. Get to it if we want opera to continue as an art form and not just as a fraudulent little con. And with that, I'll let you go for today.